Hello and welcome to Cultivating Victory Live. I'm Mary Lucero. I'm here with Glenn Schultz. We host these calls every Tuesday and Thursday to help open dialogue about building healthy food systems from the soil to the plate. Our special guest today is Dan Kittredge, who is a grower from Massachusetts. And Glenn, I'm going to let you kind of pick up from there and introduce Dan.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I'm going to introduce Dan Kittredge. He is a farmer. We're going to say possibly a bionutrient farmer. He has coined the term, meaning incorporating all types of farming systems, from organic to biodynamic to permaculture. And he teaches a 2-day course that is just dynamite. I've never ran across anything like it, the scope, the depth, and the complete understanding that he offers. And he is coming to Colorado to give that course in February 3rd and 4th. And so I would highly recommend that everybody come out and hear what Dan has to share. Given that, though, Dan also talks about one of my favorite subjects, and it's the subject of William Albrecht. And Dan's got some history about William Albrecht, and I'm hoping that he'll discuss some of that with us today. And Dan, if you will.
All right. Thanks, guys, for having me on the show, and thanks for putting a plug out about the upcoming course. If I can just sort of make a couple comments about that before talking about Albrecht. The Bionutrient Food Association, which is the organization that I'm the executive director of, our mission is increasing quality in the food supply, and by quality we're referring to flavor and aroma and nutritive value. We understand there's a pretty impressive variation in nutrient levels in food based on how they're grown, et cetera. And as a farmer, I found that the more well I, serve the soil, provide for the soil, take care of the soil, the more well my crops seem to do, and the better my bottom line is, and all kinds of other really exciting things. So the course we call Principles to Biological Systems, and certainly we do integrate wisdom from a very broad range of perspectives, trying to focus the attention on how did life evolve the system. What is we think it's a living system, and the more we can understand how to work well with it and what it needs to support it to flourish, the less work we actually have to do. The bionutrient word we've coined to refer to those compounds in food that are of biological origin, as opposed to synthesized nutrients, which are oftentimes, added to, vitamin D added to your milk or whatever it is, those synthetic compounds. You may have a level of those nutrients in your food, but it actually is not recognized by the body. And so we're talking about, working, with the soil through, farmers to increase the nutritive level in food. And that's really the agenda in the course. We talk about everything from soil testing and mineral balancing to inoculation to cover cropping and minimizing tillage to seed quality, early childhood development stages of plants, how we start them off, what are the environmental conditions, the life cycle, the whole sort of stages and steps in the process, and through the lens of how to create the environment where the microbiology, the bottom of the food chain, is able to flourish, maintaining aeration in the soil, maintaining hydration, maintaining organic matter, food, making sure sufficient minerals are there, the spectrum of biology is present and alive. Really, addressing that is really what we're trying to help farmers and growers of all sizes accomplish. The course, really does, in many cases, have backyard gardeners and homesteaders and professional farmers all present at the same time, and really, I think, getting valuable content. So with that sort of background, one of the pieces of the puzzle that I like to talk about is the mineral piece. And when we're talking about soil tests and mineral balancing and, the way that many people have been taught to address fertilizing or fertility. It's oftentimes through this soluble nutrient paradigm. People have heard of NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. If you see 5-3-4 on a bag of fertilizer or 10-10-10, those are, referring to the amounts of soluble nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And one of the foundational arguments we like to make is that for a long time, plants did just fine without fertilizer. Fertilizer is a very new concept in the history of life on this planet, and certainly its use can have some detrimental effects, and in many cases does, and it does negatively affect the farmer's bottom line. And so we're looking, we talk about soil testing and mineral balancing. We go back to the work of Albrecht as a way to frame the conversation. He was the head of the soil department at the University of Missouri, a land-grant university for 20 years. And his work showed that there were certain levels and ratios of minerals present in the soil that correlated with overall plant health, pest and disease resistance, and also, really importantly, health of the animals that ate those plants, whether they were, rabbits or, sheep or humans. It's a really interesting conversation going back into that whole history to look at some really good science that's out there on the books, peer-reviewed, published, that came out actually before what we now call conventional ag with soluble nutrient fertilizers and fungicides and insecticides. The USDA land-grant universities are doing some really amazing work, and we like to sort of make people aware of that and teach them how to engage a soil report from that perspective.
Dan, on one of the things that that I find interesting is that his work was such monumental in understanding all those health factors from soil to plants to animals. Why did the land grant universities not promote that, or how did we get to the system we're at now?
Through machinations. I mean, I don't in such a short amount of time, I don't want to be focusing on these kinds of things too much. But after World War II, there was a surfeit of manufacturing capacity of the ingredients in explosives and chemical weapons, and the interests that were managing those factories were looking for a new market, and they identified agriculture as a market and used their influence accordingly. So, it's as has happened in many aspects in our culture. The moneyed interests have taken over to a large degree, and until we understand, where our flawed understandings come from, our perspectives come from, and address them systemically, we're still going to be operating in that box. And so that's why we like to frame it as, how does life work? What is life? It's really not this mechanistic reductionist paradigm that we think is the dominant paradigm. It's life that's the dominant paradigm, and that's just something that hasn't. It's a framework. It's a perspective. It's a lens for understanding that makes a lot of stuff, actually very intuitive. I talk about colostrum, and we understand the critical role of colostrum in establishing gut flora at birth in humans or in cows. We understand that as animals, we can't digest our food. It's only the organisms in our digestive tract that digest our food for us. And if people are comfortable with that concept, we'll understand that's basically exactly how plants work also. Plants do not have the capacity to digest soil, to pull nutrients like nitrogen out of the atmosphere. But in synergy with microbes, they are entirely capable of feeding themselves, and do in nature every day of the week. So it's a series of these kinds of insights that are, in many cases, empowering to the growers who attend the course, that it's really great fun to convey.
You did the pre-meeting a month ago, 2 months ago now, at the farm, and one of the statements, concepts you conveyed that just really helped me understand how to look at soil and microbes and juvenile plants, as you're saying, was to look at them like they're people. And that people require certain things for life. And so could you just give us a brief overview on how you kind of look at and explain that to growers?
We need air to breathe, and so if your soil's tight, if you can't get your hands down into the soil, you can expect that most of the organisms that you'd like to have living down there are dead. They've died of asphyxiation. We need water to drink, right? So I say, if you've got a cow or a chicken or a cat or a child, don't water them for a week and see how they're doing. You got microbes in your soil that are actually the ones that are feeding your plants. And if they experience a dynamic where there's no water, they die. Really foundationally, we need air to breathe, we need water to drink, we need food to eat. So food is the organic matter, is the plants, make sugar in their leaves through photosynthesis, and in nature, they inject a lot of that sugar into the soil to feed the soil microbes. When you don't have crops growing there, they eat the organic residue. So if you have bare soil, functionally, there's no food for your soil life and they starve to death. I talk about how, we have had historically, environmental pollutants, toxins, whether it's radioactive fallout from the testing in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 40s, or, DDT or glyphosate or atrazine. There's been all kinds of toxins that have been, that are present in the environment that have functionally killed off whole lines of species of microbes that are just not present in our agricultural soils in the way they used to be. And so inoculation, which is, establishing that spectrum of species in the soil, I think is, I like to say is, if you're going to take one thing from my entire course, it'll cost you $5 and take 5 minutes. It's inoculate your seed. Get your hands on a broad spectrum inoculant that's got 40 or 50 different families of bacteria and 15 or 20 families of fungi, and put those spores on your seeds in your seed packets. You can do it once in the winter when you've ordered your seed, and it'll be good for the year. These are, if you understand that these microbes in the soil are living organisms, and you understand that they need air to breathe and water to drink and food to eat, and they have to be present. As I see it, that's really our primary role as farmers or gardeners, however you define yourself, is to work to reestablish all those critical environmental conditions that life needs to flourish. Because if the environment is present, in my experience, life will pretty much do most of the work for you. And the necessity of fertilizer and cultivation and, pest management, all that kind of stuff really drops down dramatically.
I got one other question, and then I'll let Mary throw a couple at. One other thing that I find fascinating that you have promoted quite a bit is the interrelationship between microbes and trace minerals in the soil, and how they basically rely upon each other to flourish. So when establishing microbes, you typically maybe have to make sure you have certain minerals available. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, well, it's not the microbes and the minerals. It's not the minerals and the microbes. It's the minerals and life. The minerals, the different elements, are crucial for life to exist. I like to talk about enzymes and, the metaphor of a socket and a wrench, or a, Allen wrench, or a screwdriver, a Phillips head, or a flathead. we have different tools that we use over and over again to do, specific jobs in mechanistic systems, whether it's taking your brake pads out and putting new brake pads in, or whatever it is, building a hoop house. You use specific tools with specific shapes and sizes for specific jobs to put things together and take things apart. And that's basically what enzymes are in living systems. And these enzymes have at their core, a broad range of different elements. They're needed for microbes to exist, they're needed for plants to exist, and they're needed for animals to exist. So we all need them. And we need dozens of different ones, like copper, zinc, manganese, cobalt, molybdenum, selenium, chromium, vanadium, calcium, potassium, manganese, boron. There's literally dozens of different elements that are needed for life to flourish, even to function. And in many cases, they are limiting factors. And so in the case of nitrogen fixation, all plants in nature have established relationships with nitrogen fixers, not just the legumes, but they need molybdenum for the nitrogenase enzyme to exist, which is a key piece of the process. Vitamin B12, which is a compound that has one atom of cobalt in the center of it, is critical for humans to live, and is critical for 80% of the species of soil life to live. So you need 1 pound of molybdenum in an acre for nitrogen fixation to occur. You need, 4 pounds of cobalt in an acre for all the B12 to be necessary for literally 80% of the species of microbes, which is like, 3.5 million species need cobalt to exist. You can add compost tea, but if you don't have the cobalt present, then you don't have life functioning. So it's a beautiful interrelated, web. And, we have all kinds of really good peer-reviewed published, literature that supports all these different pieces of the puzzle. And what we're trying to say is it's an integrated system. It's a living system. We understand biochemistry. We understand epigenetics. We understand the microbiome. We understand a lot of this stuff. Let's put it all together thoughtfully. And let's see if we can revitalize our lands. Native Americans were doing a really good job 500 years ago with this continent. The level of vitality, fecundity, on the continent was much higher than it is now. And they didn't have a wheel, they didn't have a plow, they didn't have beasts of burden. They were working much more, sensitively and systemically with nature. And I think, farmers that want to learn some of those lessons can find that their ability to live a good quality of life and produce, high quality food and, heal their ecosystem becomes much more pronounced. So, yeah.
So, Dan, I'd like to ask what you see when you give these workshops. You say that you include a range of everything from small gardeners to conventional farmers. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the transition is always difficult for a conventional farmer. If you've got money invested in your precision farm equipment, you've got irrigation equipment, you've got all this stuff designed for a chemically based system. You've got labor costs, you've got loans often supporting a lot of this work. So you've got payments to be prepared for. What do you see these growers taking away from your workshops that they can put on the ground and see it benefit their operation this year?
Yeah, I mean, while I think that the way nature works is through beautiful polycultures, I understand that that's not, where we're going to be tomorrow. And the way I like to sort of frame it for sort of larger farmers, be they conventional or not, is, you've got a fertility budget, whether it's $50 an acre or $100 an acre or whatever it is. You've got a pest and disease budget, $50 an acre, $200 an acre. If we, can look at that budget and say, take money from this product, which is counterproductive, and put it on this product, which is productive, you can use the same equipment, you can, grow the same crops, you can, manage in a very similar manner, and really begin to revitalize the system. And it can be, the beginning of a transition. If you're operating a few thousand acres, I'm not expecting people to pick up and change everything overnight. I think, any farmer who's worth his or her salt will experiment in a corner for a couple of years first to see. I say if it's true, it'll work, and if it works, it'll spread. And that, it seems to be how the organization is building, is through word of mouth from the grassroots, farmer to farmer. So yeah, and there's also lots of wonderful consultants out there who really know their craft, who can support growers in the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month decision-making process. This course is really designed as an overview, as a survey, as a sort of to help establish a different conceptual framework than you may have had access to through salespeople and sort of the extension services. There's good people, everywhere, but in many cases, farmers have not had these concepts conveyed in this manner, and it's wonderful to see the gears whirring in people's heads when I start to talk about this kind of stuff, because in many cases they're like, that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, don't take my word for it. If it sounds like it might be possible, go find a corner and play around for a year or two. So yeah, it's really just sort of about a gentle transition and thoughtful steps. The last thing we want people to do is go bankrupt, following some pie in the sky vision. You got to be realistic about your bottom line logistics. So
right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think the bottom line, it has to drive every business. What's functional.
Yeah.
I know that
Yep.
I've seen, we've seen some very successful transitions down here, because you're right. It's the biology that's supporting the growth, the biology and the minerals. And unfortunately, we have targeted minerals focused on N, P, and K. And there are many other minerals that are necessary in the system. In colleges of agriculture, it's often taught that these are needed in such small amounts that they're going to be there in the system already. Or at least that was kind of the cool thinking. And unfortunately, because we've killed the microbes, those minerals have leached out. They're no longer there.
But when you take the tissue tests, you see the symptoms of mineral deficiency. You look back into the USDA green books from the 40s and 50s, and they got pictures that show, this is what iron deficiency looks like. This is what a boron deficiency looks like. This is old information, and farmers see this all the time, and they mistake it for disease, and they apply chemicals that kill the microbes even more and tie up the trace elements. It's a good business model for people selling products, but it's not a good business model for the environment or farm viability or crop quality or human health. So yeah, that's where it gets exciting. Right.
And I think unfortunately, once you get what the microbes are doing, you see that same business model has done in healthcare what it's done in agriculture. And both systems are now financially unstable as well. If we look at the big picture of what's happening in our country and our economy, we're losing farms, and we're losing many families are going bankrupt on their health care, and it's all.
And children have diseases that children shouldn't have. I mean, it's a big deal, and I think this is a really important topic, and I don't like to say this, but part of what's so exciting about how tenuous everything is now, how many apparent major issues there are that are difficult to solve, is that people are ready to listen to some different opinions, and it is entirely true that there are thousands and thousands of farmers converting every year millions of acres to a much more biological management process, not just in North America and the US, but globally. There's a real movement afoot, and it's really exciting, and that's part of what we're trying to help develop with our Real Food campaign that we're working on with a few other organizations, is the ability to look at this all formally in the scientific method with peer-reviewed journals, look at the system as a complete system, and really help farmers identify what their limiting factors are in season. You need 2 grams of cobalt and, an ounce of this inoculant per acre. And that'll shift this biochemical pathway, which will give you, insect resistance. There's all kinds of really exciting stuff that's coming down the pike. It's always great fun to talk to farmers that are open to the conversation.
Right. And just listening to the number of growers who are seeing their net profits increase as they make the conversion is I think the kind of motivation that any grower is going to have to do it another way.
It certainly is crucial. I mean, the bottom line, that's you want to do the right thing for the right reasons, but you got to provide for your family too.
Exactly.
And so if those things line up, then there's a good reason to pay attention. So, and all this information, is not new. Much of it is decades old. It's just a question of integrating it and looking at it in relationship. I always like
shared the story from, I don't know why I always remember this scene, but when I was in high school in a vocational agriculture program, I remember sitting through a lecture and they taught us how to calculate how much nitrogen, how much fertilizer to put on your plants, and formulas to convert your M, P, and K, and read the fertilizer bag and figure out how much you need. And then the bell rang and we were all shuffling out of class, and as we headed out the door, the teacher kind of mumbles, but 4 inches of organic matter will do the same thing. And
Yep.
in hindsight, as the years went by, I'd think back to that and think, why was that the piece of news that got placed as we were going out the door, kind of inserted there at the end instead of the main part of the lecture. I mean, it's you don't have to do the calculations, you don't have to purchase the organic matter. It's a more simple system. But we were so focused on M, P, and K that we weren't looking at the whole picture. So like you say, the reduction.
And there's a business model behind it, and there's people that are pushing the business model that are, behind it. So we have to just be honest about that, and we don't need to be confrontational, but just be aware of it. And, and there's farmers like this guy in Gabe Brown, people may have heard of him in North Dakota. I think he gets, 12 inches of rain a year or something, more than 5,000 acres. And he's been able to increase organic matter 1.5% year after year. He did a 6-year trial. I went from 2% to 11% straight. He's running 5,000 acres. He's not certified organic. He's working with nature to build that organic matter. And that gives you the water holding capacity. It gives you the climate resilience. It revitalizes the ecosystem. We can do this. We can totally do this. So, yeah.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate you joining us today. I think it's really helpful to give people an overview. What I'm understanding at this point is your class is basically going to focus on principles. And then, of course, it's still up to the grower to figure out how to tweak it to match their system. But once you get this overview of what the many different components of the system are doing, then you can make better decisions about what to apply. Is that correct?
Yeah, I call it Principles of Biological Systems, and I start off, after a quick introduction with, getting questions from everybody in the audience that wants to pose them about what do you want me to talk about over the next 2 days, and then it's a conversation. And we've got some slides that, serve as a guidepost for making sure we cover the basic topics, but it really, it's all connected. And so we focus the conversation on the questions of the attendees. You can cover a lot in 12 hours. Let's just spend 20, 25 minutes. We've covered a bunch. So,
okay. And it's
multiply by 25. What's that?
What they want to hear about.
What's that?
And so it's participant driven in terms of.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't need to hear myself talk. It's an interactive conversation, You know, I've got a whiteboard and you get a handout, and we're in it together. It's not like I got slides and, you know, I'm just reading off a script. Nothing like that.
Okay.
Hey, Dan, one final question. Your association, the Bionutrient Food Association, is developing a handheld device to help consumers determine the nutritive value of food. Give us a brief description of what you've already got a prototype out, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, we've got a prototype we helped, you know, get built this past year. We're going to have, you know, they're available for people to get their own hands on them this end of this year. We're hoping to have something that is calibrated for consumer use in 2 years. So there's a window here. We can tell people, you know, it's coming down the pike, heads up. There's a lot of work involved. It could be used not just by the consumer to test crop quality when it's harvested, but by the farmer to test plant health while the crops are growing. And, you know, the more you know about what's going on in your soil, the more that information from that little spectrometer can help you guide your management practice during the year. And, you know, the first day of the course is I call fall and winter, and we talk about, you know, getting the stage set and, you know, making sure all the different conditions are present. And then the second day is spring and summer, and, you know, starting with the seed and planting and transplanting and, you know, in-season management and monitoring and, you know, foliar sprays and things like that. There's a whole bunch you can do. I call it cheating, because you don't really need to be that good of a farmer to give your plants what they need to be healthier. If you're spraying something on the plant, why not spray it? Why not give it food instead of chemicals? And, you know, for just a couple dollars an acre per application, you can do some pretty impressive things. So, yeah, no, there's a whole bunch that goes on there. And, you know, the idea with the tool is that if you can, you know, guide your fertility program based on how healthy the plants are, your ability to have really top quality crops, which is what we think the supply chain is going to be looking for pretty soon, you know, you're at the head of the class. So, yeah, it's really exciting. We think that if we can give consumers the ability to test crop quality, they'll start choosing it off the shelves, and then the buyers realize it. They'll start asking the farmers for it, and they'll probably pay premiums for it, because there's never been an excess of top quality crop in the market. It's right now people are selling by volume, and there's a lot of, you know, empty crop in the commodity markets. So, yeah, we've got a few projects we're working on, and that's one of them, and we'll certainly go into it in more depth during the course.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to add that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. You know, I think this has been a good conversation, and hopefully people find it of interest. They can certainly check out our website, bionutrient.org, for, you know, recordings of you know, lectures at our conferences and all kinds of other supplemental information. We're an educational nonprofit. We're not in the business of selling product. We're in the business of, you know, sharing information. So we've got a lot on our website people can check out if they're curious before they make a decision.